What if you suddenly discovered that a deadly disease was silently lurking inside your body, and you had no idea? Would you know the signs to look for? It's a question no one wants to ask themselves. After all, who wants to think about the possibility of something as serious as cancer? Most of us live our lives assuming that our bodies will give us the warning signs when something is wrong. But what if those warning signs are subtle, silent whispers that we can easily dismiss as nothing to worry about? What if those little signs could save your life if you just took the time to listen? Elon Musk, the brilliant mind behind companies like Tesla and SpaceX, is no stranger to the relentless grind of life. A man of innovation, constantly pushing the boundaries of what's possible, Elon seemed untouchable. He was the person everyone looked up to, the billionaire genius who was changing the world. But even someone as seemingly invincible as Elon Musk isn't immune to the unpredictable nature of life. It all started with something small, something that, at first, seemed insignificant. Elon had been feeling a little more fatigued than usual. It wasn't the kind of exhaustion that made him collapse on the couch, it was more of a low-grade tiredness, a lack of energy that he just couldn't shake. He attributed it to the usual, the demanding schedules, the endless meetings, and the constant pressure of being the CEO of not one, but two revolutionary companies. Still, he couldn't ignore that nagging feeling in the back of his mind. For weeks, the fatigue worsened, but Elon continued to push through it. After all, he wasn't one to complain. The world couldn't afford him to slow down. His team, his companies, and the future of humanity depended on him. But as time passed, the symptoms grew more persistent. The fatigue became a constant companion, and it was joined by something else. Something that, at first, was easy to brush off as just another inconvenience. Elon started experiencing pain in his abdomen, a dull ache that he couldn't explain. It wasn't severe, but it was always there, lingering just beneath the surface. He told himself it was probably just stress or maybe even something he ate. The thing about pain is that we all experience it, but we're often quick to minimize it, especially when it's not crippling. But the discomfort continued, and slowly, it began to affect his ability to focus. He couldn't concentrate the way he used to, his mind constantly distracted by the strange sensations in his body. There was also the strange change in his appetite. He didn't feel hungry as often, and when he did eat, food didn't taste the same. It was as though his senses were dulled, disconnected from the pleasures of eating. And then came the weight loss, an unexplainable drop in pounds that left him feeling weaker than usual. For someone who had always been in good shape, it was a troubling sign. But still, Elon didn't seek medical help. Why would he? After all, he was a workhorse, someone who powered through the toughest of days. He assumed these symptoms were just the result of stress, lack of sleep, and his relentless work ethic. He pushed the thoughts of sickness out of his mind, focusing instead on his next big project, the next milestone in his quest to make humanity a multiplanetary species. But then, one morning, the pain was different. It wasn't just a dull ache anymore. It was sharper, more intense, and accompanied by nausea that left him feeling weak. His body was speaking to him in a way it hadn't before, and this time, it couldn't be ignored. Something was wrong. It was that day, after a particularly long night of work, that Elon finally found himself standing in front of his doctor. He didn't want to go, didn't want to admit that there could be something seriously wrong with him. But the pain, the fatigue, and the unexplained weight loss had all reached a breaking point. There was no more brushing it off. Elon had always been a man of science, and now it was time to let science take over. He sat in the sterile, cold room of the doctor's office, his mind racing. What if this was just a minor issue? What if it was nothing at all? But deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that something more was at play. He tried to push the thoughts aside as his doctor entered the room, but the unease in his chest grew stronger. After a quick examination and a series of tests, the doctor returned with the news. Elon's stomach sank as the words hit him, "Mr. Musk, the tests came back, and we found something concerning." The doctor's tone was serious, but not panicked. It was the kind of serious that made the blood rush to your ears and left you with that sinking feeling in your stomach. The doctor explained that the symptoms Elon had been experiencing, fatigue, abdominal pain, weight loss, and the loss of appetite, were all signs of pancreatic cancer. The words were almost too much to process. Pancreatic cancer. It was one of the most aggressive cancers, and by the time symptoms appeared, it was often too late. Elon's mind raced, his thoughts spinning. Cancer. Was this really happening? For a moment, time seemed to stand still. He could hear his heart pounding in his chest as the doctor continued talking. The diagnosis was still a shock, but the reality of it settled in faster than he expected. The doctor went on to explain that while the diagnosis was serious, there were treatments available, and early intervention could make all the difference. But as Elon sat there, listening to the doctor, he couldn't help but feel a wave of disbelief wash over him. He wasn't supposed to be the one facing something like this. He had so much more to do, so many projects, so many ideas that could change the world. And yet, here he was, staring down a diagnosis that could end it all. The doctor gave him a moment to process the information before moving on to the next steps. Blood tests, scans, and further consultations would be required to determine the stage of the cancer and the treatment options available. It was a long road ahead, but there was still hope. As Elon left the doctor's office that day, a new reality had set in. For the first time in years, he felt vulnerable. The man who had once seemed unstoppable was now facing a battle that was beyond his control. But this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The road ahead would be long and filled with uncertainty, but one thing was clear: Elon Musk would fight. And along the way, he would discover something even more important than the success of his companies. He would learn the value of life itself, and how quickly it could be taken away. But what about you? What if you've been ignoring those small signs? The fatigue, the pain, the loss of appetite. What if those subtle changes in your body are warning signs? Take a moment to reflect. Don't wait until it's too late. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Stay tuned for what's next in Elon's journey, because, in the fight against cancer, knowledge is power, and early detection could be the key to saving your life. Elon Musk is a name that most people around the world instantly recognize. He's not just a tech mogul or billionaire, he's a symbol of innovation and ambition. The mind behind Tesla, SpaceX, and many other groundbreaking companies, Musk has made a name for himself by constantly challenging the status quo. His achievements are often seen as almost superhuman. But what few people realize is that behind his success, there's a person. A person with a past, struggles, and a complex, deeply human side that's not often exposed to the public. Born in Pretoria, South Africa, on June 28, 1971, Elon Musk's life began like that of many others. His parents, May and Errol Musk, had their own unique backgrounds. May, a model and dietitian, was an independent, strong-willed woman, while Errol, an electromechanical engineer, was a more complex figure. Elon's early life was filled with both brilliance and turmoil. As a child, he was quiet, introspective, and often immersed in books. He loved science fiction, computers, and anything that could fuel his growing imagination. But his childhood was not without hardship. His parents' divorce when he was young, combined with his difficult relationship with his father, left a mark on him. Despite the turbulence at home, Elon's passion for technology was clear early on. At the age of 12, he taught himself computer programming and created and sold a video game called Blaster. His entrepreneurial spirit emerged young, and his thirst for knowledge seemed insatiable. But it wasn't just technical skills that shaped him. His curiosity about the world, and his desire to make a real difference, played a pivotal role in his future. When Elon moved to the United States to attend the University of Pennsylvania, he entered a world that was far removed from his childhood struggles. At Penn, He earned degrees in both economics and physics, disciplines that would later become the foundation of his business endeavors. But his decision to leave Stanford after just 2 days of graduate school was a crucial turning point. Musk, always confident in his intuition, felt that the internet was about to change everything, and he wanted to be part of that revolution. He co-founded Zip2, which was later sold to Compaq for nearly $300 million. With that money, he didn't rest. Instead, he invested in a number of new ventures, most notably X.com, which eventually became PayPal and was sold to eBay for $1.5 billion. But even after his initial financial successes, Elon's journey was not without its challenges. Despite his immense wealth, his relentless drive often left him emotionally drained. The pursuit of perfection, the long hours, and the constant pressure of running multiple companies weighed heavily on him. His personal life also reflected this tension. Musk's relationships, particularly his 2 marriages, were strained by his workaholic nature and his tendency to pour everything into his ambitions, sometimes at the expense of his family. Still, Elon pressed on. His true passions, the ones that kept him up at night, were in space exploration and renewable energy. SpaceX was born out of Musk's dream of making life multiplanetary, while Tesla was his answer to the global energy crisis. Both companies, with all their successes and setbacks, would define the next phase of his life. But despite his incredible public persona, Elon was still human. He battled his own insecurities, experienced moments of self-doubt, and at times, felt overwhelmed by the weight of his ambitions. The pressure was suffocating. There were times when it seemed like SpaceX and Tesla might fail, and his own mental and emotional health began to show signs of strain. Yet, Elon's resilience was one of his defining traits. He always found a way to push forward, to reinvent himself, and to see obstacles as challenges waiting to be overcome. However, as driven and focused as Elon Musk was, there was still something missing in his life. His work was all-consuming, and as the years passed, he found himself losing the sense of joy that had once fueled him. For all of his successes, he couldn't ignore the underlying feeling of something being off. It was this deep internal conflict that played a role in the events that would follow. The signs of something wrong in his body, those subtle warning signals he had ignored for so long, began to echo the deeper turmoil in his mind. The exhaustion, the pain, the weight loss, symptoms he initially dismissed as a side effect of his relentless work, were, in fact, his body's way of sending a message he couldn't ignore any longer. It was time for him to stop and listen. By the time he made the decision to see a doctor, Elon was already in the midst of his busiest period. SpaceX was preparing for a series of ambitious launches, and Tesla was ramping up production for its electric vehicles. These milestones were huge for the companies, and the pressure was overwhelming. Yet, despite the magnitude of what was happening, something was wrong. Something that wasn't visible to the world, something he couldn't explain. It was in the midst of these milestones, when he least expected it, that he learned the most important lesson of his life: sometimes the most unexpected battles are the ones we fight within ourselves. In retrospect, Elon would later realize that everything he had done in his life had led him to this moment, the moment when his physical body had finally caught up with the years of exhaustion, stress, and neglect. All the long hours, the constant striving for excellence, the sacrifices made for the sake of progress, all of it had taken a toll on his body. It wasn't just the symptoms of cancer that had surfaced, it was the culmination of years of pushing his limits, ignoring his own well-being, and living in a state of constant overdrive. As he sat in his doctor's office, the reality began to set in. His body had finally spoken, and he had no choice but to listen. In the coming days, weeks, and months, he would face not only the physical challenge of dealing with cancer but also the emotional and psychological hurdles of accepting that his greatest adversary was not a technological problem to solve, but his own health. But even as he received the life-changing diagnosis, one thing remained certain: Elon Musk would fight. Just as he had fought to revolutionize space travel and create a sustainable future for humanity, he would now fight for his life. And along the way, he would uncover the true value of health, family, and the importance of being present in the moments that truly matter. In the next chapter, Elon's journey toward discovering the full extent of his diagnosis would begin, a journey that would change the way he viewed life and health forever. The battle ahead would be long, but it would also be one filled with unexpected lessons and insights. As you read this, ask yourself, what would you do if you found yourself in a similar situation? Would you listen to your body? Would you notice the subtle signs that something might be wrong? The week after Elon Musk's diagnosis was one of the hardest of his life. The weight of the news settled heavily on his chest as the reality of pancreatic cancer set in. It wasn't just a health scare, it was an existential threat to everything he had worked for, his companies, his family, and his vision for the future. For someone who had spent his life solving impossible problems, facing an unknown enemy inside his own body was an entirely different kind of challenge. The doctor had explained that the symptoms Elon had been experiencing, fatigue, abdominal pain, nausea, weight loss, were all classic signs of pancreatic cancer. But to confirm the diagnosis, a series of tests, scans, and biopsies needed to be done. The first step was a CT scan, followed by an MRI, to get a clear picture of what was happening inside his body. As Elon lay in the sterile, cold room of the hospital, he couldn't help but think back to his earlier days when he had pushed through every challenge with a relentless drive. The idea of weakness was foreign to him. Yet, here he was, vulnerable, lying on a cold table, waiting for results that could change everything. The scans came back, and the news wasn't great. The doctors confirmed the presence of a mass in his pancreas, one that was likely malignant. The tumor was relatively small, but it was in an area that was difficult to treat, and the risk of metastasis was high. They had caught it early, but it was still unclear how far the cancer had spread. The uncertainty was unbearable. Elon knew better than anyone how important early intervention was in the fight against cancer. But despite this, there was still a deep sense of disbelief. How could this be happening to him? The man who had revolutionized the electric car industry, sent rockets into space, and dreamt of colonizing Mars, how could he be vulnerable to something as ordinary as cancer? As the tests and scans continued, Elon found himself in a state of limbo. The doctors spoke to him with caution, recommending a range of possible treatment options, from surgery to chemotherapy, but each path had its own set of risks and unknowns. The one thing that was clear was that time was of the essence. If the cancer had spread, the prognosis could be much worse. It wasn't just the physical pain that weighed heavily on Elon's mind, it was the emotional toll. For the first time in years, he wasn't just thinking about the next big idea, the next leap for humanity. His thoughts were consumed with survival. The dream of a multiplanetary future seemed distant, almost irrelevant, compared to the fight for his own life. Elon didn't know what to do. His entire existence had been centered around solving problems on a grand scale, building companies, and pushing the boundaries of science. But now, he was faced with a problem that didn't have a clear solution. No amount of brilliance, no amount of work ethic, could change the fact that he had cancer. The doctor suggested a surgical approach to remove the tumor, but it would be a risky procedure. The pancreas was an organ that played a crucial role in digestion and blood sugar regulation, and surgery in that area could lead to complications. They also recommended chemotherapy to shrink the tumor before surgery, but that would mean weeks or even months of treatment, with no guarantee of success. It was a terrifying reality. Elon spent long nights researching every aspect of pancreatic cancer, reading up on the latest treatments, and consulting with top specialists from around the world. But even the best medical minds could offer only limited answers. Pancreatic cancer was notoriously difficult to treat, with a low survival rate, especially when diagnosed in later stages. It was during one of these sleepless nights that Elon found himself having an epiphany, a thought that had never crossed his mind before. For years, he had been obsessed with finding solutions for humanity's biggest problems. He had spent his career working on sustainable energy, space travel, and artificial intelligence, all with the aim of securing a better future for the human race. But now, facing his own mortality, he realized that the most important thing wasn't just building a better future for humanity, it was about living in the present, appreciating the moments that truly mattered, and valuing the people around him. For years, Elon had poured every ounce of his energy into his work, sometimes at the expense of his health, relationships, and well-being. But now, cancer had forced him to confront the fragility of life in a way that nothing else ever had. The dream of colonizing Mars suddenly felt far away, almost irrelevant compared to the love of his family, his friends, and the precious time he had left. With this newfound clarity, Elon made a decision. He would fight, just as he had fought for every other goal in his life, but he would also focus on what mattered most, his health, his family, and the people who had supported him throughout his journey. He would take the time to slow down, to listen to his body, and to confront this battle head-on, not just as a CEO or a tech visionary, but as a human being who had everything to lose. The following day, Elon met with his doctors again. They discussed the treatment options in detail. There was no easy answer, but he felt ready to face whatever came next. He made the decision to move forward with surgery to remove the tumor, followed by chemotherapy to ensure any remaining cancer cells were eradicated. It wasn't going to be easy, but it was a path that offered the best chance of survival. For the first time in a long while, Elon Musk felt a sense of control over his situation. He had chosen a course of action, and though the outcome was uncertain, he knew that fighting with everything he had was the only option. And in doing so, he would embrace the journey, not just as a quest for survival, but as an opportunity to learn, grow, and reflect on what truly mattered in life. As he prepared for the surgery, Elon took a moment to reflect on his journey, the long road that had led him from the young boy fascinated by science fiction to the billionaire entrepreneur who had transformed industries. But now, the journey was different. This time, it was about survival, family, and the power of resilience. In the coming chapters, Elon's battle with pancreatic cancer would unfold. It would be a battle of strength, determination, and a new perspective on life. But it would also be a battle of self-discovery. A journey that would ultimately redefine everything he thought he knew about health, happiness, and what it means to truly live. The morning of Elon Musk's surgery dawned clear and quiet. There was an unfamiliar stillness in the air, one that matched the tension swirling in his mind. In his usual fashion, he had kept a calm and collected exterior, focusing on the logistics of his businesses, the details of the surgery, and the people he'd need to inform. But inside, his thoughts were a whirlwind. The battle was no longer theoretical, it was real, it was personal, and it was coming for him. The ride to the hospital was almost surreal. Despite being a man accustomed to facing high-stakes situations, launching rockets, redesigning electric cars, and transforming industries, this was something entirely different. This was his life on the line. And no amount of money, influence, or innovation could change the fundamental reality. He was about to undergo a major surgery that could determine whether he lived or died. Elon's mind flashed back to the moment of diagnosis, sitting in that sterile office as the doctor explained the situation. It felt like a bad dream, like something that was happening to someone else. But now, as he prepared for surgery, it was clear, this was his reality. His thoughts were interrupted by the soft voice of the nurse, who came to lead him to the operating room. Elon smiled politely but couldn't shake the unease. He wasn't afraid. He had faced failure and near-death experiences before, especially when SpaceX's rockets had exploded or Tesla had been on the brink of collapse. But this was different. This wasn't a failure he could fix with ingenuity or sheer will. This was a fight for his life, and it wasn't just his own survival at stake. His family, his companies, the future he envisioned, all of it hung in the balance. As they wheeled him into the operating room, Elon's thoughts turned to his children. He thought of XAEA-12, his first child with singer Grimes, and his 5 other children from previous relationships. He wondered what kind of world they would inherit. Would he be there to see them grow? To teach them? To guide them as they followed their own paths? The uncertainty of the future made him more aware than ever of how much time mattered. The lights in the operating room were bright and cold, and the familiar hum of medical machinery filled the space. Elon tried to focus on the facts. The surgery had a high success rate, and the doctors were among the best in the world. But the fact remained that it was surgery on his pancreas, an organ that was not only critical to digestion but whose failure could lead to numerous other complications. As the anesthesia took hold, Elon's thoughts began to blur, and his body slowly drifted into unconsciousness. The surgeons, expert in their craft, began their work, carefully removing the tumor that had been discovered in his pancreas. As they worked, they also ensured that no cancerous cells had spread to other parts of his body. The operation, though long and complicated, went smoothly. But as the team closed him up, the reality of the fight ahead began to sink in. Waking up in the recovery room was disorienting. The pain was sharp, but not overwhelming. What was overwhelming was the sense of vulnerability. For the first time in a long while, Elon Musk was no longer in control. He was at the mercy of his doctors, his body, and the outcome of the surgery. The feeling of helplessness was strange, but it also brought with it a sense of humility. He had always believed that his intellect and determination could overcome any challenge. But now, he realized, some battles could not be won by sheer force of will. The recovery process was slow and painful. Elon spent the next few days in the hospital, surrounded by doctors, nurses, and family members. The first few hours were the hardest. His body ached, his energy was depleted, and the effects of the anesthesia lingered, making everything feel distant and surreal. But there were moments of clarity. Small moments when he would look around the room, take in the faces of his loved ones, and think about what really mattered. As the days passed, Elon began to regain his strength. The doctors monitored him closely, making sure there were no complications from the surgery. The tumor had been successfully removed, but the question of whether cancer had spread still loomed. The next phase of his treatment would be chemotherapy, which would help ensure that any remaining cancer cells were eradicated. For Elon, the road ahead was unclear. He had always prided himself on being a visionary, a problem solver. But this was different. No amount of innovation or engineering could solve the problem of his health. It was a humbling realization. Yet, as always, he remained determined. He couldn't let this defeat him. He couldn't let it define him. During his recovery, Elon had plenty of time to think. He thought about the people who had supported him through the years, the engineers, the employees, the scientists, the innovators, many of whom had become more like family than co-workers. He thought about his friends, some of whom had known him long before the fame and the fortune, and how they had stuck by him through thick and thin. And most of all, he thought about his children. The thought of not being there for them, the thought of not seeing them grow up, was something he couldn't bear. And so, he made a promise to himself. No matter what the future held, he would fight. He would fight for his children, for his family, and for the future that still had so much potential. He wasn't done yet. He had a long way to go. And he wasn't going to let cancer take that away from him. The chemotherapy that followed the surgery was grueling. Elon lost his hair, and his energy plummeted. His body, once in peak condition, now felt fragile and foreign. But the pain, the exhaustion, it wasn't enough to break him. He continued to work from his hospital bed, making phone calls, reviewing plans, sending emails. He didn't want to slow down, even though his body was screaming for rest. But as the days turned into weeks, something began to shift within him. It wasn't just his body that was healing, it was his perspective. For the first time in years, he began to understand the importance of slowing down. To take stock of the things that mattered most. To reconnect with the people who had been there for him through thick and thin. And to understand that, sometimes, the greatest challenges weren't the ones that could be solved by innovation. They were the ones that tested your strength, your resolve, and your ability to fight when the odds seemed insurmountable. As the chemotherapy continued, Elon's body began to show signs of improvement. His energy started to return, and the tumor markers in his blood began to decrease. But the road to recovery was far from over. He knew that the battle was not won yet. It would take time, effort, and strength. But if there was one thing Elon Musk knew, it was that he wasn't one to give up. In the coming chapters, we will explore the emotional toll of this journey and the lessons Elon learned along the way. The fight for his life wasn't just about physical survival, it was about rediscovering what truly mattered and gaining a new understanding of the world he had spent his entire career trying to change. As the weeks of chemotherapy passed, Elon Musk found himself in a constant battle, physically, emotionally, and mentally. His once boundless energy, the very thing that had powered his numerous ventures and innovations, had been drained by the harsh side effects of the treatment. The powerful drugs coursing through his veins were doing what they were meant to, but at a steep cost. The physical toll was enormous: nausea, hair loss, and extreme fatigue. But it wasn't just his body that was suffering, his mind, too, was grappling with something much harder to define: fear. Fear was something that Elon Musk had never really had to deal with before. Throughout his life, he had been fearless, driven by a need to push the limits of what was possible. He had faced countless failures, SpaceX rockets that exploded, Tesla's near bankruptcy, but none of it had shaken his resolve. There had always been a solution, a way forward. But now, lying in a hospital bed, battling an illness that was completely outside his control, Elon began to feel what he could only describe as a deep, gnawing fear. The kind of fear that creeps up on you in the middle of the night when you're alone with your thoughts, when the future feels uncertain, and when there's no clear path to victory. He had always been the one in control, whether it was directing the development of electric vehicles, pioneering space travel, or revolutionizing energy production. He could always solve a problem. But pancreatic cancer? This wasn't something that could be solved with sheer brilliance, ingenuity, or relentless work ethic. This was a battle of the body, not the mind. And yet, despite the fear that threatened to overwhelm him, there was a small flicker of determination inside Elon. A small voice that told him not to give up. It wasn't the grand, world-changing mission he was used to, it wasn't about Mars or electric cars or artificial intelligence. It was simply about surviving. It was about fighting for the chance to live and see another day, another year, another moment with the people he loved. One of the hardest parts of this journey was the isolation. Despite being surrounded by family, friends, and medical professionals, there were moments when Elon felt profoundly alone. The disease was personal, so personal that it left him questioning everything he had worked for, everything he thought he understood about life. He had spent his entire career focused on making humanity's future better, but in the face of his own mortality, he realized how little he had focused on living in the present. During his hospital stays, he would often have long conversations with his brother, Kimball, who had always been his closest confidant. Kimball was the steady one, the calm presence in Elon's whirlwind life. He listened patiently as Elon expressed his fears and frustrations, acknowledging that the situation was terrifying and uncertain. But Kimball also reminded him of something that Elon had long forgotten: the importance of connection. The importance of the people around him. The importance of the small, everyday moments that make life worth living. You've always been about changing the world, Elon. But right now, you need to focus on changing yourself. You need to fight for your future, but you also need to appreciate the present. The people who love you are here, right now. Don't miss these moments, Kimball told him one evening, after Elon had spent hours in frustration, trying to find a way to solve his condition. It was a hard pill to swallow. Elon had always been the dreamer, the visionary who looked to the future and believed that anything was possible. But Kimball's words struck a chord. Elon realized that the battle ahead was not just about fighting cancer, it was about embracing the human side of the fight. It was about leaning on the people who cared for him, and allowing himself to be vulnerable. There were other tough conversations, too. His close friends, some of whom had been with him through thick and thin, reached out to check on him regularly. They, too, offered words of encouragement. Some of them had faced their own battles with illness, and they spoke to him not just as business partners or fellow entrepreneurs, but as human beings who understood the fragility of life. One afternoon, while Elon was sitting in his hospital room, feeling utterly drained, a message popped up on his phone. It was from his friend, Larry Page, the co-founder of Google. "Elon, I know this is the toughest battle you've ever faced, but I want you to know that I'm here for you. We're all here for you. You've done so much for the world, but right now, focus on what matters most, your health and your family. You'll get through this." The words meant a lot to him. Larry, too, was a visionary, someone who had pushed the boundaries of technology and innovation, but here, his message was simple: survival, family, and strength. It was a reminder that even the world's greatest minds, the men who had built empires, were human, too. Elon's path toward recovery was slow. Some days, he felt like he was making progress. Other days, it felt as though the cancer was winning, with the chemotherapy taking its toll. But there were small victories along the way. The days when he was able to get out of bed and walk around the hospital. The days when his appetite returned. The moments when he could FaceTime his children and tell them that everything would be okay. The moments when his mind cleared enough to think about the future, not just the fight against cancer, but his work, his mission, his legacy. Yet, even as he found new strength, the emotional toll was still heavy. There were days when he felt as though the cancer had taken something from him, something intangible. It wasn't just his body, but his sense of self. For someone who had spent his life solving problems and pushing forward, the uncertainty of his own health was a bitter pill to swallow. But the more Elon thought about it, the more he realized that there was power in vulnerability. There was strength in asking for help. There was courage in admitting that he couldn't do everything on his own. It was a lesson he had never truly learned in his fast-paced, high-stakes world. And it was a lesson that cancer, for all its cruelty, had forced him to learn. As he continued with his treatment, Elon found himself more reflective than ever before. He spent time with his children, reminding them how much they meant to him. He reconnected with old friends, rekindling relationships that had been strained by the pressures of his career. And most importantly, he began to look inward, searching for the strength he needed to face the days ahead. The physical battle would continue, and the outcome was still uncertain. But in the midst of it all, Elon Musk was learning something far more important than any technological breakthrough or business success. He was learning the true meaning of resilience. As the weeks passed, Elon's condition improved slowly, but the battle was far from over. Chemotherapy continued to ravage his body, leaving him feeling weak and drained. Yet despite the toll it was taking on him physically, there was an undeniable shift happening within him. For the first time in his life, the relentless, all-consuming focus on his career and his ambition had to take a back seat. There was someone, more important, his family. For years, Elon had been driven by the need to push the boundaries of possibility. He had sacrificed countless hours, relationships, and moments of rest to further his goals of revolutionizing the world through SpaceX, Tesla, and his other ventures. His relentless pursuit of innovation had often meant that family, while important, wasn't his primary focus. His mind was consumed with solving the world's biggest problems. Bringing humanity to Mars, creating sustainable energy solutions, and advancing artificial intelligence. But now, as he lay in a hospital bed, the fight for his life became a reminder that his greatest legacy was not just in the technologies he had helped bring to life, but in the people who loved him. Elon's children were, as always, at the center of his thoughts. The bond he shared with them was deep, something that transcended his busy, public life. They had always been a source of joy, but now, in his weakened state, they were a source of strength. XAEA-12, his first child with Grimes, was only a toddler. Elon found himself thinking about their future together, the walks they would take, the talks they would have as she grew older, and the lessons he hoped to impart to her. The thought of not being there for her as she navigated the world was something he couldn't bear. But it wasn't just XAEA-12, it was his other children, too. The thought of missing out on their lives, of not being there to help guide them through their own challenges, was a driving force in his recovery. On his toughest days, when the chemotherapy left him feeling like a shell of his former self, it was the thought of his children that kept him going. During their visits, he would try to put on a brave face, not wanting them to see how exhausted and frail he truly felt. But there were moments when his guard dropped, and they saw the vulnerability in him. They were young, but they sensed the change in him. It was in the way he looked at them, with a deep, almost desperate love. He remembered a moment with his older son, Damien. During a visit to the hospital, Elon's strength was fading, but he managed to sit up and smile at his son. Damien, just 15 at the time, was sitting at his father's bedside, looking a little unsure of what to say. "You'll be okay, Dad?" Damien asked quietly. Elon smiled weakly. "I will be. Just a little tired. But I'll be all right. I have to be. For you." The emotion in his son's eyes told him everything. The concern, the love, the silent understanding that things might not be as simple as they once were. Elon had always been the invincible one in his family, the man who had built empires, the man who took on the impossible. But now, as he looked into his son's face, he saw something different, the vulnerability of a child who didn't want to lose his father. For the first time, Elon let the tears come. He had always prided himself on being a man of logic, of innovation, of not showing weakness. But in that moment, the gravity of what he was fighting for, his family, was too much to ignore. His children needed him, and that was the only thing that mattered. He thought of his ex-wife, Tallulah Riley, and his other ex-partners, and the way they had been there for him when it mattered most. Despite the complexities of their relationships, they were all still connected by the same bond, a shared responsibility to the children they had brought into the world. There was no doubt that they, too, were concerned for him. They reached out regularly to check on him, offering their support and understanding. Elon's relationship with his parents, too, had become an essential part of his healing. His mother, Mae Musk, was a constant source of comfort. Despite her own busy life and career, she made sure to be there for him in every way possible. Her gentle encouragement and steady presence helped remind him that, even in the face of such a terrifying diagnosis, family was his anchor. One afternoon, as Elon rested, Mae sat beside his bed and gently placed a hand on his arm. "You've always been strong, Elon," she said, her voice soft but firm. "But you've never had to face something like this. And that's okay. Let others help carry the weight for a while." Her words struck him in a way he wasn't expecting. He had always carried the weight of the world on his shoulders, but now, in this moment of fragility, he realized it was okay to lean on others. It was okay to let his family, his friends, and his team step in and offer their support. The experience of being cared for by those who loved him was an eye-opening one. Elon, who had spent so many years giving to others, now had to learn how to receive. He had always been the giver, the one who pushed forward, the one who made things happen. But now, as he lay in a hospital bed, he had to learn to accept that not everything was within his control. Sometimes, survival wasn't about conquering the world, it was about leaning on the people around you when you were too weak to stand on your own. It was during these moments that Elon began to see a different kind of power. The power of love, the power of family. He had spent his life thinking about how to change the world, but now, he was beginning to understand that sometimes the most important changes happen within the walls of your own home, within the bonds you share with those closest to you. The slow recovery process continued. As the chemotherapy sessions took their toll, Elon would have days when he could barely summon the energy to get out of bed. But there were other days when he would sit up, look out the window, and feel a sense of hope that he hadn't felt in a long time. He wasn't out of the woods yet, but with each passing day, he felt a little stronger, a little more determined. And it was his family who kept him grounded. Every visit from his children, every kind word from his friends, every moment spent with his mother, all of these became the fuel that kept him going. The battle against cancer was far from over, but with the unwavering support of those he loved, Elon Musk began to understand something profound. No matter what happened, he would never truly be alone. As the recovery continued, Elon's thoughts began to turn to the future, not just his own, but the world's. How could he apply the lessons he was learning to his work? How could his experience help shape the future of the companies he had built and the technology he hoped to develop? The road to recovery was still long, but now, with the love and support of his family, Elon Musk was ready to face whatever came next. As Elon's treatment continued, there was an undeniable shift in his perspective. He had come to terms with the fact that life, in all its complexity, was not something he could simply outsmart or control. For a man whose whole career had been driven by the need to conquer the impossible, this realization was both humbling and transformative. The doctors had given him a rough prognosis. The cancer, while not yet fully under control, was responding to the treatment. Elon had always been a data-driven man, so he understood that the numbers were improving, even if the path to full recovery remained uncertain. Yet despite the medical optimism, the emotional toll was beginning to wear on him. The moments of hope that had been so fleeting in the beginning were starting to feel more real, but there were still many hard days ahead. On one particularly difficult morning, when his body felt as though it were being torn apart from the inside out, Elon had a conversation with his best friend and business partner, Gwynne Shotwell, the president of SpaceX. Gwynne had been an integral part of his life for years. They had built SpaceX together, and she had always been there, steadfast, reliable, and fiercely supportive. But this was different. This wasn't about the next mission to Mars or the launch of a new rocket. This was about something much more personal. Sitting at his bedside, Gwynne looked at him with the same determination that had made her one of the most successful women in the aerospace industry. "Elon," she said, her voice steady but filled with compassion, "I know it's been hard. I know this is the toughest thing you've ever faced. But remember, the world needs you. Your vision, your leadership, your ideas, they matter. And this fight you're in, it's not just for you. It's for everyone who believes in what you've built. Don't let cancer take that from you." Elon looked at her, a faint smile playing at the corners of his lips. Gwynne had always been the realist to his dreamer, the one who kept him grounded when his ambition led him to chase moonshots. But now, it wasn't just about work. It was about survival, about purpose, and about something even more intangible, legacy. "Gwynne, I've been thinking a lot about what happens if I don't make it through this," Elon admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've always been so focused on the future, so obsessed with the idea of changing the world. But now, I'm wondering if I've missed something. I've been so caught up in what comes next that I've lost sight of the here and now." Gwynne nodded, understanding the weight of his words. She had seen Elon at his best and at his most vulnerable, but even now, she knew that his mind was still racing, processing, analyzing. The fight for survival wasn't just about beating cancer, it was about redefining his purpose. And for a man like Elon, that was a battle every bit as intense as the one against the disease. "Maybe it's time to redefine what winning means," Gwynne suggested. "Maybe it's not about what you build or what you accomplish, but about how you fight and who you fight for. You've always said that you want to make life better for humanity. Well, now, the fight is for yourself, and for the people who love you." Her words hit him like a thunderbolt. He had always been driven by the grand vision of making life multiplanetary, of advancing humanity into the future. But in that moment, he realized that there was something even more important, his connection to the people around him. His legacy was not just in the things he had built, but in the relationships he had nurtured, the lives he had touched, and the people who believed in him. That night, as he lay in his hospital bed, Elon thought about the words Gwynne had said, and for the first time in weeks, he felt a sense of clarity. The pain, the uncertainty, the fear, they were still there, but they no longer defined him. What mattered now was his determination to fight not just for his own survival, but for the people he loved, for his children, and for the world he had always dreamed of building. The next day, as he prepared for yet another round of chemotherapy, Elon decided to take control of his journey in a way that was both deeply personal and radically different from his usual approach. He called his team at SpaceX and Tesla, his inner circle, and told them that he needed to step away from the day-to-day operations for a while. It was a hard decision, but one he knew was necessary. The fight against cancer required every ounce of his energy, and he couldn't continue to split his focus. But he wasn't stepping away entirely. Elon knew that his work would always be a part of who he was, and he wasn't ready to let go of the projects that had defined his life. Instead, he asked his teams to take on more responsibility, to step up and show the world what they were capable of. This was not a retreat, it was a recalibration. He would continue to offer guidance, to inspire, but now he would do so from a distance, focusing on his health and his family. It wasn't just his companies that needed to adapt. Elon had to adapt, too. The visionary who had once poured all his energy into the future had to learn how to focus on the present. He had to learn how to be present in the lives of the people who mattered most to him, his children, his family, and his friends. With this new approach, Elon began to rebuild his life. He spent more time with his kids, making sure to cherish every moment, whether it was a simple dinner at home or a quiet walk through the garden. He began meditating, something he had never thought necessary in the past, finding moments of peace amid the storm. He spent hours reading, reflecting on what had truly mattered to him over the years, and what would matter in the future. Elon's recovery was slow, but with each passing day, he began to regain strength, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually. He began to understand that his legacy was not just in the world-changing innovations he had brought to life, but in the way he had lived, loved, and fought for those around him. The journey was far from over. There would still be difficult days ahead, and the threat of cancer loomed large. But Elon Musk had reached a turning point. He had accepted that life wasn't just about the future, it was about how he lived in the present, how he fought for the things and people he loved, and how he faced his own mortality with grace, resilience, and determination. As the weeks slipped by, Elon Musk found himself in the midst of a slow but steady recovery. His body was regaining some of the strength it had lost during his battle with cancer, but more importantly, his mind was going through a profound transformation. The conversations with his family, his team, and even the moments alone with his thoughts, had helped him realize that his purpose in life was not just to create the future of humanity, but also to live in the present moment, fully immersed in the love and connections that made life meaningful. It was an early morning when Elon found himself reflecting on the many hours he had spent in hospital rooms and recovery suites. He had been forced to slow down in ways that were uncomfortable, but in the stillness, he found clarity. As he sipped a cup of black coffee in his home, a thought hit him. He had spent years building companies to push humanity forward, but in doing so, he had overlooked the people and moments that made it all worthwhile. He had seen death's shadow and had come to a startling realization: his legacy wasn't just in the rockets or electric cars he had created. It wasn't in the grand ideas that had changed the course of history. It was in how he treated the people around him. It was in the lessons he imparted to his children, the friendships he cultivated, and the way he showed up for others when they needed him the most. "Dad, can we go to the park today?" his daughter, Xaea 12, asked, her small voice cutting through his reverie. Elon smiled at the sound of her voice. It was a reminder that time, no matter how precious, could still be filled with joy and simplicity. He had once imagined that only the extraordinary moments mattered, those big milestones in his life when he launched a new rocket or unveiled a breakthrough technology. But now, he knew that these seemingly small moments, like spending a sunny afternoon at the park with his daughter, held the deepest value. "Of course, sweetheart," Elon replied, setting his coffee down and pushing his thoughts aside. "Let's go." As he got into the car, driving toward the park, Elon reflected on how much his perspective had changed. Just a few months ago, he would have been absorbed in work, thinking about SpaceX's next mission to Mars or Tesla's upcoming product launch. Today, his thoughts were focused on Xaea 12's laughter, the feel of her tiny hand in his, and the joy of seeing her run across the grass, chasing the ducks at the pond. The busy schedule, the looming deadlines, the pressures of being the CEO of multiple companies, none of it mattered in this moment. What mattered was the present, and right now, it was his daughter, the fresh air, and the laughter ringing through the air. Later that afternoon, as they sat on the swings, pushing XAEA-12 higher into the sky, Elon had an epiphany. This was his real purpose, to be there for his children, to help them grow, to guide them through the challenges of life with love and wisdom. For so long, he had believed that his purpose was only tied to his work, the grand, world-changing work. But now he realized that the true measure of his success was not just in what he had built, but in how he had lived, loved, and nurtured those closest to him. The change in his perspective was both subtle and profound. It wasn't about abandoning his vision for the future, it was about adding balance. He could still strive for the stars, but he also needed to remember that his roots were deeply embedded in the soil of the present. The balance between work and life, ambition and love, was where his true power lay. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Elon sat in his office at home, reviewing plans for the next SpaceX launch. His mind, however, was no longer consumed by the relentless drive to innovate. He still cared deeply about SpaceX's mission to make humanity a multiplanetary species, but now he understood that he couldn't chase the stars at the expense of the Earth beneath his feet. He needed to be grounded, not just in his work, but in his relationships and in his well-being. He picked up the phone and called Gwynne Shotwell. They had worked together for over a decade, building SpaceX from the ground up, and she had become one of his most trusted confidants. "Gwynne," Elon said, his voice calm but resolute, "I've been thinking about the direction of SpaceX. We've done amazing things, but I think it's time to look at how we balance everything. It's not just about launching rockets anymore. It's about creating a sustainable future, for humanity, for our team, for the people who depend on us." Gwynne was quiet for a moment before responding. "Elon, you've always pushed us to think bigger. But I hear you. It's about finding that balance, about realizing that sometimes the most impactful innovations come from making sure the people behind the mission are taken care of." "Exactly," Elon said, his voice filled with conviction. "It's not just about what we create. It's about how we live as we create it. I want to make sure that every person in this company, every person who's ever believed in what we're doing, feels valued. And I want to make sure that my kids know how much they mean to me, how much they've always meant to me." Gwynne chuckled softly. "Elon, I think you're finally learning the value of slowing down and smelling the roses. It's a good thing. A very good thing." Elon smiled, a quiet sense of peace settling over him. He had always been driven by the need to achieve. But now, with a life-threatening illness behind him and a renewed sense of purpose ahead of him, he was beginning to understand that true success wasn't defined by what you built or how fast you built it, it was about who you were along the way. The next few months were a whirlwind of recovery, reflection, and recalibration. Elon continued his work with SpaceX, Tesla, and his other ventures, but he did so with a newfound sense of balance. He set boundaries, limiting his travel, scheduling time for family, and taking more breaks for self-care. He no longer saw rest as a luxury but as an essential part of his ability to contribute to the world. He found that the more he focused on nurturing the people around him, the more his ideas and his companies flourished. Elon's recovery was not just physical, it was emotional, spiritual, and even professional. He began to find joy in things he had previously overlooked, the laughter of his children, the quiet moments spent with friends, the sense of fulfillment that came from knowing that, no matter what happened, he had done the best he could to live with purpose. As Elon Musk embraced this new balance in his life, the impact was not just personal. It began to ripple outward, affecting everything he touched, including his companies and the people he worked with. He was no longer the man who lived for the next big breakthrough, working relentlessly at the expense of his health and relationships. He was still driven by a fierce passion to push the boundaries of technology and innovation, but now he had learned to look beyond the immediate results and focus on the long-term, sustainable future. This shift in mindset was about more than just taking care of himself. It was about the people around him, the teams he led, and the world he was trying to build. At Tesla, for example, he had always been at the helm of the electric car revolution, obsessed with the idea of changing the world one vehicle at a time. But as he reflected on his journey, Elon realized that he had been so focused on scaling Tesla's operations and improving the technology that he had sometimes overlooked the well-being of the employees who made it all possible. Now, he made it a priority to sit down with his leadership team and discuss ways to foster a healthier, more sustainable work culture. One afternoon, Elon called a meeting at Tesla's headquarters in Palo Alto. His leadership team sat around the large conference table, the usual mix of anxiety and anticipation in the air. But today, Elon's demeanor was different. He wasn't rushing through the agenda or pushing for immediate results. Instead, he took a deep breath and looked around at the team that had helped turn Tesla into a global powerhouse. "I've been thinking a lot about how we've been working over the years," Elon began, his voice calm and introspective. "We've done amazing things, pushing the boundaries of electric vehicles, leading the charge in renewable energy. But I think we've also pushed ourselves too hard. And when you're focused only on what's next, you miss out on what's happening right in front of you." There was a brief silence in the room as everyone absorbed his words. They were used to Elon's intensity, his impatience for progress. But this was something different. "Going forward, I want to prioritize people as much as products," Elon continued. "It's not just about making the best cars or the fastest vehicles. It's about making sure our teams are well supported, that they have time for their families, that they don't burn out in the process of changing the world." One of his senior engineers, a woman named Rachel, looked up with a thoughtful expression. "Elon, are you suggesting we shift away from our current pace of innovation?" she asked, her tone cautious but respectful. "The way we've been pushing the limits of technology, it's been what's kept us ahead of the competition." "I'm not saying we stop innovating," Elon replied, his voice firm but gentle. "We'll keep pushing the limits of what's possible. But we have to do it in a way that's sustainable. We need to be mindful of the human side of innovation. If we burn out the people who are creating this future, then what are we really building?" Rachel nodded slowly. "I see what you're saying. It's about ensuring that our people don't just survive the work, they thrive in it." "Exactly," Elon affirmed. "If we're going to build a future that's better for humanity, we need to make sure we're taking care of the people who are building it." The discussion that followed was one of the most productive and open Elon had ever had with his leadership team. Ideas flowed, and strategies were proposed for creating a work environment that encouraged not just innovation, but also well-being. There were discussions about flexible work hours, mental health support, and fostering a more collaborative culture within the company. For the first time in years, Elon felt as though he was not just driving Tesla forward, but nurturing it, building it with intention and care. This was the kind of leadership Elon had always wanted to model, but hadn't fully embraced until now. It wasn't just about the products or the missions, it was about the people who made those things happen. And now, with a fresh perspective, Elon was committed to ensuring that the success of Tesla, SpaceX, and his other ventures would not come at the cost of the health and happiness of the people who made them possible. The change in his approach extended to his personal life as well. Elon had always been an intense, often solitary figure, consumed by his work. But as his relationships with his children and friends grew stronger, he began to appreciate the importance of community. He started to spend more time with the people who mattered most to him, seeking out moments of connection in between his many commitments. He would take his children to their favorite places, spend time with old friends, and even go on small trips to recharge. Through this shift, he began to learn a new way of being. For someone who had spent so many years pushing boundaries in every aspect of his life, he now found strength in embracing vulnerability and nurturing the relationships that were at the core of his world. These simple moments, like playing chess with his son X or having dinner with his mother, May Musk, became just as important to him as the next breakthrough at Tesla or the Mars mission at SpaceX. Yet, even as he embraced a new way of living, Elon's commitment to the future of humanity remained as strong as ever. He still saw the incredible potential of technology to transform the world for the better. He was still deeply committed to making life multiplanetary, to building sustainable energy systems, to reducing the impact of climate change. But now, his drive to change the world was tempered with the realization that the most important thing was to build a future that could be enjoyed by all. By the people, not just the technology. In the coming months, Elon's companies reflected this shift in mindset. At SpaceX, there was an increasing focus on collaboration and teamwork, and at Tesla, the company rolled out new programs designed to support employee well-being, such as wellness initiatives and family-oriented events. The results were palpable. Productivity increased, employee morale improved, and innovation was as strong as ever. But more than that, there was a renewed sense of purpose among his teams. They were no longer working just for the next milestone or profit margin, they were working to build a better future for everyone. The lessons Elon had learned during his battle with cancer were beginning to manifest in every aspect of his life. He was no longer a man driven solely by his own ambitions, but a leader who understood the value of balance, community, and human connection. His vision for the future was clearer than ever. A future where technology and humanity worked in harmony, where the people who made that future possible were treated with the care and respect they deserved. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The shift in Elon Musk's life wasn't just a personal transformation, it was a ripple effect that began to influence the broader world. As his companies adjusted to a more balanced and sustainable approach, the message became clear: progress and innovation must be coupled with a deep commitment to humanity. This philosophy began to spread beyond his inner circle and his business ventures, sparking a global movement toward responsible, purpose-driven change. It began with small, yet significant actions. At Tesla's annual shareholder meeting, Elon took the stage, his demeanor calm but resolute. This year's meeting was different. It wasn't just about quarterly profits, new products, or market share, it was about the direction the company, and the world, was heading. He had a new vision, one that encompassed not just the future of electric vehicles, but the broader implications of sustainable development and social responsibility. I've always believed in the power of technology to change the world, Elon began, looking out over the sea of faces in the auditorium. But I've also come to realize that the world we're creating with that technology needs to be better, not just in terms of carbon emissions or energy consumption, but in terms of how we care for each other. We're in the middle of something much bigger than any one of us. What we do now will shape the future for generations. The room was silent. Tesla shareholders, analysts, and journalists alike were used to hearing Elon talk about electric cars and space travel. But this was something different. It was a call to action, not just for the people at Tesla, but for everyone. Elon continued, "It's time for all of us to reconsider how we approach progress. It's not just about the products we make or the technologies we invent. It's about how those products and technologies impact people, the people who build them, the people who use them, and the people whose lives are touched by them. We need to rethink what it means to create a better world. It's not enough to simply innovate. We must innovate in ways that are sustainable, inclusive, and responsible." The crowd was stunned. For years, Elon had been known for his relentless drive and ambition, qualities that had been crucial to the success of his companies. But here, in this moment, he was asking for something more. He was calling for a new kind of leadership, one that valued people over profits and embraced sustainability not as a buzzword, but as a guiding principle. After the meeting, Elon received an outpouring of support from unexpected quarters. Environmental activists praised his stance on sustainability, while human rights groups applauded his emphasis on worker welfare. But the response that stood out the most came from his own employees. For many of them, this was the moment they had been waiting for. A CEO who not only cared about the bottom line but about the human beings behind the work. Rachel, the senior engineer at Tesla, was one of the first to reach out to Elon after the meeting. "Elon, what you said today, it resonated with me deeply," she wrote in her email. "It's not just about the next big thing. It's about making sure that everything we do is part of something bigger. I think we're on the verge of something incredible, not just in terms of technology, but in terms of the way we build our future. Elon read the email with a quiet sense of pride. It was a sign that his message was not just being heard, but being embraced. He responded simply, "Thank you, Rachel. Let's make sure we build something that matters." Over the next few months, this shift in perspective began to take shape in real-world actions. Tesla announced a new initiative aimed at not only reducing its carbon footprint but improving the quality of life for the workers who were building the electric vehicles. The company increased its investment in mental health programs, offered more flexible work arrangements, and started offering profit-sharing opportunities for employees at all levels. For the first time, Tesla wasn't just thinking about how to make electric vehicles more affordable, it was thinking about how to make the workplace more human-centered. SpaceX, too, began to embrace this new direction. Elon's dream of making humanity a multiplanetary species remained as urgent as ever, but now the company also focused on creating an inclusive, supportive work environment for its engineers, technicians, and astronauts. There was a renewed emphasis on mental health, ensuring that employees had the support they needed to thrive, both in their professional and personal lives. The mission to Mars was still a powerful motivator, but now it was paired with a deep responsibility to the people who would make that mission a reality. These changes didn't go unnoticed. Other companies began to take cues from Tesla and SpaceX, and a broader movement toward more human-centered leadership and sustainability began to grow. Elon Musk, the once fiercely private and intensely focused entrepreneur, was now seen as a champion for a new kind of capitalism, one that balanced profit with purpose, innovation with empathy, and progress with responsibility. The media, which had often portrayed Elon as a genius madman, now began to see him in a different light. Journalists started to write about the new Elon Musk, the man who had overcome a life-threatening illness and emerged with a more balanced, thoughtful approach to leadership. Articles praised his focus on the holistic well-being of his teams, his commitment to creating a sustainable world, and his belief in the power of innovation to improve lives, not just generate wealth. But Elon knew that the road ahead was still long. True change didn't happen overnight, and he was committed to seeing this vision through. As he sat in his office late one evening, reviewing plans for the next SpaceX launch, he realized that the work he had started, both in his personal life and in his businesses, was only the beginning. There was still so much to do. But now, there was a renewed sense of purpose in everything he did. The future wasn't just something he was trying to reach. It was something he was building, one thoughtful, deliberate step at a time. As Elon Musk's new vision gained traction, his influence started to expand beyond the confines of his companies and into the broader societal landscape. The world was watching, and people were beginning to realize that the future Elon envisioned wasn't just about electric cars or rockets to Mars. It was about creating a new paradigm for how we work, live, and interact with the planet. The corporate world, once dominated by a cutthroat approach to business, was slowly starting to change. More and more companies were beginning to understand that success didn't just mean financial growth, it meant ensuring that employees thrived, that the environment was respected, and that communities were supported. Elon's focus on holistic progress resonated with a generation of younger workers who were looking for more than just a paycheck. They wanted purpose in their work, a sense of contribution to something bigger than themselves. They wanted to feel that their labor mattered, that they weren't just cogs in a machine, but integral parts of a greater mission. Elon Musk's approach, which emphasized sustainability and well-being, aligned perfectly with these ideals, and it was attracting talent in droves. At Tesla, the effects were already apparent. The company's engineering teams were more motivated than ever, energized by the knowledge that their work was contributing not just to a greener future, but to a more equitable, responsible world. Innovation continued to move forward at lightning speed, but there was an added layer of purpose now. People weren't just trying to design the next car, they were designing a future where everyone could thrive in a more sustainable world. One employee, Ethan, had been with Tesla for over 5 years. He had seen the company's journey from the early days of struggle to becoming a leader in the electric vehicle market. But the changes that had occurred over the past year were unlike anything he had experienced before. "I've always loved working here," he said to a colleague one day. But this feels different. It's like we're not just building cars anymore. We're building a future. And that's a feeling I can't even describe. Ethan's sentiments were echoed across the company. Tesla's employees were united by a renewed sense of purpose, driven not just by the innovative products they were creating, but by the knowledge that they were part of something larger, a movement toward a better, more sustainable world. But the ripple effect was not limited to the employees of Tesla. The broader tech industry was taking notice. Companies that had once been wary of Musk's brashness and unconventional leadership style were beginning to embrace the principles he had championed. They saw the value in investing not only in technology but in the well-being of their workers. They saw that embracing a more holistic approach to business didn't just make moral sense, it made financial sense too. Elon's message of balance resonated particularly with younger entrepreneurs and innovators who were tired of the relentless grind that had come to define Silicon Valley. These young leaders wanted to change the world, but they also wanted to enjoy life while doing it. They didn't want to sacrifice their health or their relationships in pursuit of a dollar. Elon's transformation from a workaholic tech mogul to a thoughtful, family-oriented leader became a source of inspiration for them. For the first time in years, Elon Musk was starting to become a symbol of something different, a leader who balanced his ambition with a sense of responsibility, who was driven by a greater vision for humanity. And while his past had been filled with audacious goals and unyielding determination, his future was now shaped by a deeper understanding of what it meant to be truly successful. One of the most tangible examples of this new philosophy came in the form of a collaboration between Tesla and a nonprofit organization focused on clean water access in developing countries. The initiative was something Elon had been passionate about for years. He knew that innovation in sustainable energy was only part of the equation. To truly impact the world, the benefits of that innovation had to reach beyond just the wealthy and industrialized nations. It had to be available to everyone. The partnership began as a pilot project in rural Africa, where access to clean water was a major issue. Tesla's solar technology was used to power water purification systems, which could provide clean drinking water to communities that had previously struggled with access. The project was a massive success, and it quickly caught the attention of global leaders and philanthropists. Elon's vision for a sustainable, interconnected world was no longer just a theory, it was becoming a reality. The future we're building isn't just about spaceships or electric cars, Elon said in a speech at a global summit on climate change. It's about making sure that the benefits of technology are accessible to everyone, no matter where they live. It's about making sure that every human being has the opportunity to thrive in a world that is sustainable, just, and equitable. The speech sent waves of excitement through the audience, and the ripple effect continued to grow. Governments, nonprofits, and corporations all began to see the potential of the projects that Elon Musk was championing. They began to look at progress in a new light, not just as a series of technological breakthroughs, but as an opportunity to improve the lives of people around the world. Elon's influence had grown far beyond the tech industry. His approach to leadership, which blended innovation with empathy, began to inspire leaders in politics, education, and social activism. Everyone seemed to be realizing that the path to a better future wasn't just about technology, it was about people. And it was about making sure that the future we were building was one in which everyone could participate. But with this newfound influence came new challenges. As Elon's ideas began to shape the global discourse, he faced increasing pressure from all sides. Governments, while impressed by his vision, began to push for greater regulation of the industries he had helped revolutionize. Environmental groups, while supportive of his initiatives, demanded more aggressive action to address climate change. And within his own companies, the pressure to deliver on ambitious projects continued to mount. As Elon Musk's influence continued to grow, so too did the pressures that came with his newfound leadership position. While his companies were thriving and the world was paying attention, the weight of his responsibilities was beginning to take its toll. The global movement that he had sparked was a powerful force, but it wasn't without its challenges. Elon had always been used to the pressure. From the early days of Tesla's near bankruptcy to the audacious goals of SpaceX's Mars missions, he had faced more obstacles than most people could imagine. But this was different. The eyes of the world were on him, and with that came an overwhelming sense of expectation. People wanted him to change the world, and they wanted it done yesterday. At Tesla, the pressure was mounting on multiple fronts. The company had revolutionized the electric car market, but now the bar had been set even higher. As Tesla expanded its product lineup and increased its production capacity, there was growing demand for the next big breakthrough, something that would solidify the company's place as the undisputed leader in sustainable transportation. But while the world clamored for innovation, Elon knew that technology alone wasn't the answer. Sustainability, for him, wasn't just about reducing carbon emissions or producing electric vehicles, it was about creating a new ecosystem, one that included sustainable energy solutions, better infrastructure, and a holistic approach to addressing the challenges of climate change. Internally, the pressure to meet these lofty goals was creating a palpable tension. Engineers, designers, and production teams were working around the clock to develop the next generation of Tesla vehicles and energy solutions. But as production targets increased, so did the strain on the company's employees. There was a growing concern that the relentless drive for innovation could begin to take a toll on Tesla's culture, the very culture that Elon had worked so hard to foster. One evening, Elon sat in his office at Tesla's headquarters, staring at a series of reports on his desk. The numbers were good, but not great. There had been delays in the production of the new Tesla Model X, and the company's energy division had encountered setbacks in deploying its solar panels on a larger scale. His thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. "Come in," he called, looking up to see one of his senior engineers, Sarah, standing in the doorway. "Hey, Elon," Sarah said, stepping into the room. "I wanted to talk to you about something." Elon waved her in, gesturing to the chair across from him. "What's on your mind?" Sarah hesitated for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "It's about the production schedules. I know we're pushing hard to meet deadlines, but some of us are getting worried. There's a lot of pressure to hit numbers, and it's affecting the team's morale. People are feeling stretched thin, and we're not sure if we can keep up at this pace without burning out." Elon listened intently, feeling the weight of her words. He had always been one to push his teams hard, believing that the best way to create breakthrough innovations was to constantly push the limits of what was possible. But hearing it from one of his top engineers made him realize that something needed to change. "I get it," he said after a long pause. "The last thing I want is for anyone to feel like they're being stretched too thin. We're in this together, and if the team isn't firing on all cylinders, it's not going to work. Let's take a step back and reassess our priorities. We can't afford to sacrifice the well-being of the people who are making all of this happen." Sarah nodded, visibly relieved. "Thanks, Elon. I know we all want to see Tesla succeed, but we also want to make sure we're not sacrificing everything in the process." Elon smiled, appreciating her honesty. "You're right. I'll speak to the leadership team and make sure we find a balance. We'll figure out a way to hit our goals without burning people out." But the conversation stayed with him long after Sarah left his office. He had always believed that the road to success was paved with hard work and sacrifice. Yet, as he looked at the faces of his employees, the people who had made Tesla what it was today, he realized that the relentless pursuit of perfection could only take him so far. There had to be a better way. This realization led to a difficult decision. Elon called a meeting with his executive team to discuss the issue. It was a rare moment of vulnerability for him. He was used to being the one with all the answers, the one pushing everyone forward. But now, he had to admit that his unyielding drive was creating an unsustainable pace for his teams. If they were going to achieve the long-term vision he had set, they needed to rethink their approach. "We can't keep doing this at the current pace," Elon said, his voice firm but thoughtful. "We've set ambitious goals, but if we don't give our people the space to recharge and grow, we'll never get to where we need to be. The future I'm building isn't just for Tesla. It's for the people who work here, for the families they support, and for the world we're trying to save. If we push too hard, we risk losing everything we've built. The room was quiet for a moment as the executive team absorbed his words. Then, slowly, one by one, they nodded in agreement. "We'll figure out a way to prioritize our goals," said one of his senior executives. "It's about sustainability, not just in the products we make, but in how we run the company." Elon's decision was a turning point for Tesla. It marked the beginning of a shift in how the company operated, not just in terms of production but in its broader philosophy. Elon knew that the world needed Tesla to succeed, but he also knew that success couldn't come at the expense of the people who were making that success possible. But even as he addressed these internal challenges, the pressure from outside was only increasing. Governments and regulators were starting to scrutinize the rapid growth of companies like Tesla, questioning their practices and demanding stricter regulations. The public's expectations were also growing, people wanted to see results, and they wanted them now. The world had begun to take notice of Elon Musk's every move. His companies, Tesla, SpaceX, and his myriad other ventures, were revolutionizing entire industries. Yet, despite the outward success, Elon was facing pressure from all sides, as government regulators, industry peers, and even the public began to scrutinize his every decision. His ambitious vision was coming to a crossroads. How could he continue to push boundaries without compromising the very principles he had built his empire on? It was a crisp autumn morning when the first major blow came. Elon's team at SpaceX had successfully completed another test flight of their Starship prototype, a monumental achievement in the company's quest to take humans to Mars. Yet, as the news of the success spread, it was quickly overshadowed by a report in the media about SpaceX's environmental impact. Some critics pointed out that the company's rocket launches, while groundbreaking, were contributing to air pollution and greenhouse gas emissions. At first, Elon dismissed it. He had become used to criticisms from environmental groups that didn't fully understand the complexities of space exploration. But as the weeks went on, the issue snowballed. More media outlets picked up the story, and soon, government regulators were asking SpaceX to account for its environmental footprint. Elon knew he needed to address the situation before it spiraled out of control. He arranged a meeting with key executives from SpaceX, Tesla, and his other ventures to discuss the growing concerns. "Elon," said Gwynne Shotwell, the president of SpaceX, "this is becoming a bigger issue than we anticipated. We've always been transparent about the trade-offs involved in space exploration, but the pressure is mounting. If we want to continue making the progress we've made, we need to show that we're actively working to minimize the environmental impact of our launches." Elon leaned back in his chair, tapping his fingers on the desk. He knew the stakes were high. SpaceX's goal of making humanity a multiplanetary species was at the forefront of his mind, but he also understood the public's concern about the environment. He could no longer afford to simply push forward without addressing the consequences. "We're going to have to do both," Elon said finally, his voice steady. "We'll continue pushing the boundaries of space exploration, but we'll do it in a way that aligns with our broader vision of sustainability. We'll explore new ways to offset emissions, develop cleaner technologies, and integrate sustainable practices into every aspect of our operations. If we're going to take humanity to Mars, we have to show that we're leading by example here on Earth." The room fell silent as the executives absorbed his words. It was a bold vision, but it was also necessary. Elon had always believed that the best solutions came from the most difficult challenges. This was no different. "Let's start working on this," Gwynne said. "We can't afford to delay. We'll need a comprehensive strategy to reduce emissions, and we'll need to make sure the world knows that we're taking this seriously." Meanwhile, Tesla was grappling with its own set of challenges. While the company's electric vehicles were growing in popularity, the rapid expansion of production had created new hurdles. Elon's decision to address employee well-being had paid off in terms of morale, but now the company had to balance growth with maintaining its high standards of quality. At Tesla's Gigafactory in Nevada, workers were facing burnout from long shifts and mounting expectations. Elon had made it clear that Tesla's mission was bigger than just profit, it was about changing the world. But some employees were beginning to feel that they were sacrificing their personal lives for the cause. The question now was, how could Tesla balance this growth without sacrificing the people who had made it possible? Elon was well aware of the challenge. He had been at the helm of Tesla for years, pushing the company forward through each obstacle. But now, as Tesla's reach grew, he realized that leadership couldn't just be about pushing harder. It had to be about creating an environment where people felt supported and empowered to achieve their best work. He spent several late nights poring over reports and brainstorming new strategies with his leadership team. One of the key ideas that emerged was a new approach to work-life balance, one that didn't just involve giving employees more time off, but also implementing a range of policies to foster personal growth and well-being. The new initiative, called Sustainable Innovation, would encourage employees to take time for personal projects, explore creative endeavors, and recharge. Tesla would also invest in more flexible work arrangements and expand its mental health support services. It was a bold move, and Elon hoped it would set a new standard for companies everywhere. "This is going to be challenging," he said in a meeting with Tesla's leadership team. "But if we're going to change the world, we can't do it alone. We need to build a team that is as passionate about the mission as we are, and that means making sure they have what they need to thrive." Elon's determination to foster a healthier work culture resonated deeply with his employees. For some, it was a long overdue change. For others, it was a sign that the man who had built an empire on ambition was now beginning to realize that the journey to the future was just as important as the destination. But outside of the walls of his companies, Elon continued to face external pressures. Government regulators, particularly in Europe and the United States, were increasingly concerned about the growing influence of tech giants like Tesla and SpaceX. While many applauded Elon's vision for the future, others feared the monopolistic potential of his expanding empire. During a crucial meeting with European Union regulators, Elon was forced to address concerns over Tesla's market dominance. The European Union had been putting pressure on tech companies to ensure that they were not stifling competition and were adhering to fair market practices. While Elon's companies had led the charge in technological innovation, the regulators were cautious about the implications of his success. "We don't want to stifle innovation," one EU regulator explained during the meeting, "but we also need to ensure that companies like Tesla aren't creating unfair advantages by monopolizing the market. We're talking about your plans for the gigafactories and the rollout of electric vehicles. There needs to be a balance." Elon took a deep breath. He had always believed in free markets and the power of competition to drive progress, but now, the very success of his companies was raising concerns about fairness. "I understand your concerns," he said, choosing his words carefully. "But my goal has always been to make electric vehicles accessible to everyone. The more we build, the more we reduce the cost of production. We're not trying to monopolize anything, we're trying to create a world where sustainable energy is the standard, not the exception." As the meeting continued, Elon realized that this moment marked a critical point in his journey. He was no longer just a businessman, he was a global figure with the power to shape entire industries and economies. And with that power came an unprecedented level of responsibility. As Elon Musk faced the growing pressures of being at the helm of some of the world's most ambitious companies, he began to feel the full weight of leadership bearing down on him. While his success in revolutionizing multiple industries was undeniable, it was clear that the road ahead would be anything but smooth. He had crossed into a new frontier, one that required not only exceptional vision and creativity but also a heightened sense of responsibility and diplomacy. The challenges were many: regulatory scrutiny, public perception, and the mounting pressure to deliver on promises. But there was one issue that had been weighing heavily on his mind for some time: his health. Over the past few months, Elon had started to feel the signs of fatigue. Long nights working, back-to-back meetings, and the constant stream of decisions that needed his attention were beginning to take a toll on his body and mind. He had always been someone who thrived on long hours and pushing himself to the limit, but even he had to admit that he wasn't invincible. He had started noticing subtle changes: slightly blurred vision, occasional dizziness, and a persistent, gnawing pain in his abdomen. At first, he dismissed it as stress. After all, he was running multiple companies, dealing with global crises, and constantly in the public eye. But the pain became harder to ignore, and a sense of unease began to settle in. It wasn't until a routine medical checkup that the gravity of the situation became clear. The tests revealed that Elon was showing early signs of a health condition that could have serious consequences: pancreatic cancer. The doctor, though cautious, advised him to undergo further tests and immediately adjust his lifestyle. The news hit Elon harder than he had anticipated. Sitting alone in his office later that day, he reflected on the whirlwind of events that had brought him here. He had always pushed the limits, striving to change the world, to create a legacy. But now, faced with his own mortality, the urgency of his mission took on a whole new meaning. He wasn't just working for the future of humanity anymore, he was working for his own future. At that moment, Elon realized that he needed to take a step back. For years, he had placed the weight of the world on his shoulders, convinced that only he could push the boundaries of space exploration, electric vehicles, and sustainable energy. But now, he had to confront a brutal truth: he wasn't alone, and he couldn't do it all by himself. He made the decision to take a temporary leave of absence from his companies to focus on his health. It wasn't easy. His mind raced with thoughts of what would happen in his absence, how his companies would fare without his constant drive. But deep down, he knew it was the right choice. The world would continue, and his vision would live on through the talented people he had surrounded himself with. As he sat in his office, preparing to inform his team of his decision, he thought about the future of Tesla and SpaceX. He had spent so many years building these companies from the ground up, and now, more than ever, he had to trust the leadership teams he had put in place. He had always known that no one man could change the world on his own. Now, it was time to prove it. He sent out a message to his closest executives: "I'm stepping back for a while to focus on my health. I have full confidence in all of you to carry the vision forward. Continue pushing the boundaries, but remember that taking care of yourselves is just as important as taking care of the mission. We're in this together, and I'll be back stronger than ever." As Elon took time to address his health, he realized something profound: his journey wasn't just about technology or innovation. It was about people. The people he had worked with, the families they supported, and the future they were building together. His legacy wasn't just in the companies he had founded or the rockets that had launched into the sky. It was in the collective effort to create a better, more sustainable world. But as the days went by, the pressure of the situation began to take its toll. The media, always eager for a story, began speculating on Elon's health, and rumors started circulating. Some wondered if he would return to his role at the helm of his companies. Others questioned how much his absence would affect the global movement he had helped create. The world was waiting for answers, and Elon knew he needed to respond, if not for himself, then for everyone who had believed in his mission. During a brief phone call with his close advisor, Steve, Elon expressed his thoughts. "Steve, do you think I made the right decision?" Elon asked, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. "Absolutely," Steve replied without hesitation. "You've done more than most people could in several lifetimes. Taking care of yourself now isn't just for you, it's for everyone who depends on you. And trust me, Elon, you've built a team that can carry the vision forward. Your absence might feel strange, but it won't stop the momentum. It's not about you, it's about what you've created." Elon took comfort in Steve's words, but doubt still lingered. The pressure to get back to work, to continue leading, was intense. But as he sat back and focused on his health, he began to see things with a new perspective. The journey ahead wasn't just about pushing toward the next breakthrough, it was about ensuring that the people around him were equipped to handle whatever came next. As Elon stepped into the unknown territory of managing his health while maintaining his empire, the next few months were a critical period for his companies. The world would continue to watch, but Elon knew that it was the collective strength of his team that would determine the future. Elon's decision to step back from his daily duties was not an easy one, but it was one that proved to be transformative. not only for him but also for his companies. For the first time in years, he had the space to focus on his health and reflect on his priorities. However, as much as he was trying to focus on healing, the weight of his absence still hung heavy over Tesla, SpaceX, and his other ventures. The question remained, could these companies continue to thrive without him at the helm, guiding them through every decision? It wasn't just the external pressures that weighed on Elon. The personal toll of his health diagnosis was also becoming more apparent. He'd always been a workaholic, someone whose life had been so entwined with his companies that the two were practically inseparable. Now, with health challenges at the forefront, the very foundation of his identity seemed to be shifting. Elon had spent countless years building his empire, cultivating a reputation for being hands-on, never backing down from a challenge. His presence was synonymous with the boldness of Tesla's innovations and the groundbreaking nature of SpaceX's projects. Yet, now he had to face a reality where he could no longer be everywhere at once. He called a series of meetings with key executives from Tesla and SpaceX, all of whom had been chosen not just for their technical expertise, but also for their unwavering loyalty and commitment to his vision. These were people he trusted, but even more importantly, they were people who believed in the broader mission, one that transcended the individual. "I've been thinking about our future," Elon began in a virtual meeting with his leadership team. "And I know you've all been stepping up in my absence. I'm incredibly grateful for everything you've done. But now, more than ever, I need to ask something of all of you. Can you take the vision and keep it moving forward without me?" There was a silence for a moment, as everyone on the call processed the gravity of his words. Gwynne Shotwell, the president of SpaceX, was the first to respond. "Elon, we're here because we believe in the mission," she said, her voice steady and confident. "You've built something incredible, but we understand that it's bigger than just you. We're committed to seeing it through. We've got your back. You've trained us to take on this challenge, and now it's our time to step up." The words were a balm to Elon's soul. It was one thing to have created a team that was capable, but it was another thing entirely to know that the people you'd surrounded yourself with were not only capable but were ready to lead in your place. Over the following weeks, the executive team at Tesla and SpaceX took on more responsibility. For some, it was the first time they had been in charge of the day-to-day operations without Elon's guidance. There were difficult decisions to be made, like how to streamline production in the face of supply chain issues, or how to maintain the relentless pace of innovation SpaceX had set, all while dealing with regulatory scrutiny. Yet, despite the challenges, a shared sense of purpose began to shine through. For example, at SpaceX, Gwynne and her team accelerated work on the Starship program, pushing forward with tests and design changes. There was a renewed sense of urgency to not only complete the missions but to push for sustainability, something Elon had been adamant about even before his health challenges arose. Meanwhile, at Tesla, the focus shifted slightly towards scaling production in a way that didn't compromise the company's standards. The launch of new vehicle models, particularly the highly anticipated Cybertruck, was in the works, and there were endless technical challenges that the team had to address. But with the leadership team stepping up, Tesla was not only maintaining its place as the industry leader in electric vehicles, it was expanding on that foundation, focusing more on energy storage and solar products, two areas that would make a significant impact on the global energy crisis. While his absence was undeniably felt, the companies were thriving in ways that surprised even him. There was a sense of relief in knowing that his legacy was in good hands. It was a lesson in trust, a trust that had been nurtured over years of relentless work, vision, and belief in the people around him. However, with each day that passed, Elon became more acutely aware of the fragility of time. Health challenges weren't something that could be avoided or outrun. As much as he wanted to be involved in every decision, he knew he had to be strategic about where his energy went. He couldn't focus solely on the minutiae of daily business operations. His time had to be invested in the bigger picture, the long-term goals that would ultimately shape his legacy. He found himself thinking more and more about the broader impact of his work. His mind would wander to Mars and the dream of humanity becoming a multiplanetary species. SpaceX had made incredible strides, but there was still so much to be done. Similarly, Tesla's push for sustainable energy was just the beginning. Elon had often said that the future of humanity depended on making energy cleaner and more accessible. He had always viewed himself as a disruptor, but now he understood more than ever that real disruption could only happen if the groundwork was laid by people who shared his vision. Through it all, Elon began to develop a new kind of leadership, one that wasn't defined by his constant presence but by his ability to inspire others to take ownership of the mission. This was the true test of leadership, being able to step back and see others rise to the challenge, not out of necessity, but because they truly believed in what they were building together. But this transformation wasn't just professional. On a personal level, Elon was becoming more connected to the people closest to him. He spent more time with his children and began to cherish the moments that, in the past, he might have dismissed as distractions. He began to understand the importance of balance, a concept he had long struggled with in his relentless pursuit of his vision. Despite the internal and external pressures, a sense of clarity began to emerge. He had always believed that the key to success was doing what others thought impossible. But now, he realized that the real key was trust. Trust in his team, trust in his family, and most importantly, trust in the future he had worked so tirelessly to create. As the chapter came to a close, Elon sat quietly at his desk, looking out over the sprawling view of the Tesla Gigafactory in California. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the landscape. It was a peaceful moment, one he hadn't experienced in years. In the distance, he saw the faint glow of a SpaceX rocket launch. The journey toward the stars was far from over, but Elon Musk had learned a valuable lesson. Sometimes, the greatest breakthroughs come not from the work we do alone, but from the trust we place in others to carry the torch forward. Elon Musk had always been a man who thrived on pressure. Whether he was challenging the automotive industry's status quo with Tesla or looking to send humans to Mars with SpaceX, his work had always been a race against time. But now, for the first time, he was faced with a challenge that didn't have an immediate solution: his health. The diagnosis of early-stage pancreatic cancer had been a wake-up call that shook Elon to his core. In the months since stepping back from his companies, he had undergone several rounds of treatment, including chemotherapy. It was a grueling process, one that drained him physically and emotionally. The side effects of the treatment were harsh: nausea, fatigue, and a constant sense of vulnerability. It was a far cry from the tireless innovator who had once worked 100-hour weeks with barely a thought for his own well-being. Elon had always prided himself on being able to push through adversity, but this was different. He wasn't just dealing with technical problems or business hurdles, he was confronting his own mortality. The reality of his situation forced him to slow down in a way he had never allowed himself to before. He had always believed that the future was in his hands, that it was up to him to lead the charge toward a better tomorrow. Now, he was learning that sometimes, the future required letting go. During the early months of his recovery, Elon spent a great deal of time reflecting on his life and the journey that had brought him to this point. He thought about his childhood in South Africa, his early ventures in technology, and the audacious ideas that had driven him to create companies that reshaped entire industries. He thought about the people who had supported him, his family, his friends, his colleagues, and the countless sacrifices they had made along the way. One of the most significant realizations during his recovery was how often he had overlooked his own well-being in the pursuit of his goals. His relentless drive had come at the cost of relationships, of moments with his children, and of his physical health. The long hours, the constant pressure, the need to always be on, it had all taken a toll. While he was recovering, his companies continued to flourish in his absence. Tesla's stock continued to rise as demand for electric vehicles reached new heights, and SpaceX's Starship program made significant strides toward its goal of human space travel. There was a sense of momentum that seemed unstoppable. Yet, despite the success, Elon felt a sense of detachment. He had spent so many years building these companies that it was difficult for him to imagine them moving forward without his constant presence. But the reality was that they were moving on, and they were doing so without him. As his health began to stabilize, Elon found himself at a crossroads. He had always been a visionary, driven by a sense of urgency to change the world. But now, he was grappling with a deeper question: what was the real meaning of his work? What did he want his legacy to be? And more importantly, what kind of future did he want to leave for his children and the generations to come? To explore these questions, Elon started spending more time with his family, particularly his 5 children. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to be present with them, to savor the simple moments of life. He took them to the beach, played games, and had long conversations about the future, his own future and the future of the world. It was in these quiet moments that Elon began to understand what truly mattered. He had spent so much of his life thinking about technology, innovation, and the legacy of his companies. But he realized that his greatest legacy might not be the rockets that reached the stars or the electric cars that roamed the roads. It might be the people he inspired, the relationships he nurtured, and the lives he touched along the way. Elon also spent a great deal of time reflecting on his health journey. It had been an emotional roller coaster, filled with moments of doubt and fear, but also moments of resilience and hope. He found strength in the support of his family, his friends, and his colleagues. And he found a new sense of purpose in using his platform to raise awareness about the importance of early detection and prevention in cancer care. He began speaking more openly about his experience, sharing his story with the world in the hopes of encouraging others to take charge of their health. With each passing day, Elon's outlook on life began to shift. He realized that, while the work he was doing was important, it was not the only thing that defined him. There was more to life than business and innovation. There was love, there was family, and there was the opportunity to make a difference in ways that extended beyond the walls of his companies. As he began to feel stronger, Elon started to re-engage with his teams at Tesla and SpaceX. He didn't dive back into the daily grind of running the companies, but he began to have more strategic conversations, offering guidance when needed and sharing his insights on the long-term vision for both companies. He was no longer the hands-on leader he had once been, but he had come to terms with that fact. The future was no longer about him, it was about the people he had empowered to carry the torch forward. In one of his first public appearances after his recovery, Elon spoke at a tech conference, addressing an audience that included some of the brightest minds in the industry. As he stood on stage, he reflected on his journey, his health battle, his companies, and the vision for a better future that had always driven him. "I've learned a lot over the past year," Elon began, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. "I've learned that no matter how hard we work, no matter how many hours we put in, the most important thing is to take care of ourselves. If we don't, we won't be around to see the future we're building." The audience listened intently, and for the first time in a long while, Elon felt a sense of peace. His work wasn't finished, but it had evolved into something much bigger than himself. It was about the people around him, the communities he had touched, and the legacy of innovation that would continue to shape the world. As he finished his speech and stepped off the stage, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. His road to recovery had been long and difficult, but it had given him a new perspective on life. He wasn't just working to change the world, he was working to ensure that the future was one worth living for. As Elon Musk moved through the early stages of his recovery, he found himself re-evaluating not just his approach to work, but the way he viewed leadership. For years, his leadership had been synonymous with intensity, urgency, and an unwavering commitment to the mission. But now, after confronting his mortality, Elon realized that the essence of leadership wasn't about constantly being in control or dominating every decision, it was about empowering others to lead, to innovate, and to thrive. Elon had built Tesla and SpaceX into two of the most influential companies in the world, but the personal cost had been steep. His relentless drive had left little room for a balanced life. He often viewed himself as the only one who could push the envelope, the only one who could make the impossible possible. But now, with the gift of perspective, he understood that true leadership wasn't about being the person who always knew the way, it was about inspiring others to find their path and support them along the way. His shift in perspective began to shape how he approached his role at Tesla and SpaceX. Instead of micromanaging, Elon started focusing more on long-term strategy and vision, delegating day-to-day decisions to the leaders he had surrounded himself with. He trusted his team more than ever before, realizing that their collective intelligence and dedication were the keys to carrying his vision forward. One of the first major tests of this new leadership philosophy came when Tesla faced a massive supply chain disruption. The company had been expanding rapidly, and as demand for electric vehicles surged, the pressure on suppliers reached a boiling point. Tesla's ability to deliver cars was starting to lag, and it was clear that Elon's presence, or lack thereof, was going to be felt. Instead of jumping into action himself, Elon held a series of discussions with his leadership team, including Zach Kirkhorn, Tesla's CFO, and Drew Baglino, the Senior Vice President of Powertrain and Energy Engineering. They were both key players in Tesla's growth, and Elon had always trusted them to execute his vision. The pressures mounting, Elon began in one of their first meetings. "We need to make decisions that will have long-term effects on this company, not just short-term fixes. I know we've done a lot to build the infrastructure, but now we need to think about how to create the supply chain of the future." Drew nodded. "We've been looking into alternative suppliers, but the real challenge is the bottleneck at our existing factories. We need to optimize production and rethink how we're doing things." Zach chimed in, "We could also look into improving the automation process. It's a huge opportunity for us to accelerate and scale quickly." Elon listened intently, and for the first time, he didn't feel the need to step in and provide a solution. Instead, he encouraged his team to brainstorm, to challenge the status quo, and to come up with creative solutions. His role wasn't to give them the answer, it was to ensure they had the freedom and the resources to find it themselves. "It's not just about making more cars, it's about making the right kind of progress," Elon said, his voice steady. "I want us to look 5, 10, 15 years ahead and figure out how we're going to keep innovating while also meeting the demand for today. Whatever it takes, we need to find a way to push the boundaries." The team got to work, and within weeks, they had identified several opportunities to improve automation, optimize production, and diversify suppliers. Tesla not only overcame the immediate supply chain disruption but emerged stronger, with a more resilient infrastructure in place. Elon didn't have to do it all himself, his team had the skills, the creativity, and the dedication to solve the problem. They had become leaders in their own right, capable of tackling challenges without constant direction from him. This shift in leadership style extended to SpaceX as well. Elon had long been deeply involved in every detail of the company's rocket launches and innovations. But as SpaceX continued to scale, he recognized the need for a new approach. He began stepping back more, trusting key individuals like Gwynne Shotwell, SpaceX's president, and Tom Mueller, the founder of the propulsion division, to take the reins on key projects. One of the most pivotal moments came during the final preparations for SpaceX's first crewed mission to Mars. It had been years of planning, testing, and refining, and the pressure to ensure success was immense. Elon had always envisioned himself as the one to lead the mission, but this time, he knew his role was different. He wasn't the one preparing the rockets or overseeing the final countdown. Instead, he focused on the broader vision, the long-term impact of human colonization of Mars, and how this mission would change the trajectory of humanity. At a strategy meeting with SpaceX's leadership team, Elon took a step back, his health still a consideration. He had grown thinner, weaker, but his mind was sharper than ever. As he sat down to discuss the mission, he didn't rush to dictate every step. Instead, he asked Gwynne, Tom, and others for their insights. "We've come a long way with Starship, but we need to make sure we're not just ready for the mission, we need to prepare for the challenges beyond it," Elon said, his voice calm but firm. "What's next? What happens when we land on Mars? How do we sustain life? How do we make sure this isn't a one-off mission, but the first step in something much bigger?" Gwynne Shotwell looked at Elon with a thoughtful expression. "We need to think about infrastructure. Communication, power, food, water. It's not just about the mission, it's about the sustainability of the colony. I think we need to focus on building a long-term plan for Martian survival, one that can evolve over decades. Elon nodded, a sense of pride swelling in his chest. He had built the foundation for this mission, but now, it was up to others to shape its future. He had created the framework, the vision, but he wasn't going to be the one driving every step. The future of space exploration, like the future of Earth's energy transition, was no longer dependent on one person. It was a collective effort. As the meeting ended, Elon felt a sense of peace wash over him. He had always been driven by a need to prove something to the world, to show that impossible things could be done. But now, he realized that his success was not about proving himself, it was about proving to the world that we can accomplish incredible things when we work together. In this new era of leadership, Elon understood that the most important thing wasn't the ability to work harder or faster than anyone else. It was the ability to build a team that could carry on his vision even when he wasn't there. And as he looked toward the future, he knew that his work wasn't done. But he also knew that he had laid the groundwork for a brighter tomorrow, a tomorrow that was already being shaped by the people he had empowered. As Elon Musk continued to focus on his recovery and step into a new phase of leadership, the repercussions of his decisions were beginning to unfold in unexpected ways. While his companies, Tesla and SpaceX, had undoubtedly flourished in his absence, there were still many challenges ahead. The health scare had not just altered his personal life, but it had ignited a ripple effect across the tech world, the business world, and even the space industry. Now, Elon had to grapple with the consequences of his newfound approach to leadership, and the path forward wasn't as clear-cut as he had hoped. One of the immediate impacts of Elon's absence was the public's perception of him. For years, his larger-than-life persona had been an integral part of his brand. He was known for his boldness, his hands-on involvement, and his tireless work ethic. But the moment he stepped back, a shift began to take place. Investors, stockholders, and even fans began to question whether Elon was still the driving force behind his company's success. At Tesla, this skepticism was most pronounced. While the company's stock had remained strong, some analysts began to speculate about its future trajectory without Elon at the helm. Would Tesla continue to innovate at the same pace without his constant presence? Would the company's vision shift now that he was no longer as involved in daily operations? In one particularly tense meeting with investors, the topic of leadership came up. The room buzzed with unease, and Elon, now more accustomed to stepping back from the spotlight, listened intently as questions were raised. Elon, you've always been the face of Tesla. Your vision, your ambition, they've been the driving forces behind this company, one of the investors remarked, his voice tinged with concern. But now that you're stepping back, what does that mean for Tesla's future? Are we seeing the beginning of a new phase, or a decline? Elon looked around the room, gathering his thoughts before responding. The old Elon would have defended himself fiercely, perhaps even dismissed the concerns with a quick rebuttal. But now, he was different. He understood the importance of communication, of honesty. I've always said that Tesla's mission is bigger than me, he began, his voice calm but resolute. My goal has never been to build a company just for the sake of having my name on it. It's about accelerating the transition to sustainable energy. That mission remains the same, and it will continue to drive everything we do. He paused, allowing his words to sink in before continuing. Tesla is not about one person. It's about the incredible people we've brought together, people who are just as passionate about the mission as I am. The future of Tesla will always be about the team, the technology, and the mission. We have the people in place to carry it forward. While his words were meant to reassure, there was an undeniable tension in the air. Investors were still uncertain. They had grown used to Elon's charisma, his unrelenting focus. They had built their trust in him, not just in the company itself. At SpaceX, the challenges were a little different. The company's success in launching rockets and developing technology for Mars exploration had attracted attention on a global scale. However, with Elon's health scare, the question on many minds was how the company would evolve, especially as it approached its most ambitious goal yet, a human mission to Mars. The team at SpaceX, under the leadership of Gwynne Shotwell, had been pushing ahead with plans, but the pressure was mounting. Every milestone, every success or failure, was viewed through the lens of Elon's personal involvement. It became clear that even though the company had achieved remarkable progress, many saw Elon as the ultimate symbol of its success. In a private conversation with Gwynne, Elon expressed his concerns. "I don't want to be the face of SpaceX anymore," he said, his voice tinged with a mix of frustration and relief. "I don't want people to think that it's all about me. It never was." Gwynne, who had been with SpaceX since its early days, placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "I understand, Elon. But you need to realize that you're still the reason we're here. Your vision, your drive, it's what got us to this point. But we're ready to keep pushing without you if you need to take a step back. The team is solid, and they know the mission." Elon nodded slowly, taking in her words. He had always prided himself on his ability to inspire and lead, but now, he understood that he had created something bigger than himself. SpaceX wasn't just a company, it was a movement, a collective effort to change the future of space travel. And that was something he had set in motion, not just by his actions, but by the people he had entrusted with the responsibility. But even as he recognized the strength of his teams, there was no escaping the fact that his absence had a ripple effect. The companies were succeeding, but the world was watching, waiting for him to return to the forefront. At home, Elon's relationship with his children had deepened, and it was in these quiet moments with them that he found the most clarity. He had spent so much of his life chasing after a vision of the future that he had neglected the present. But now, he was making a conscious effort to spend time with his family, to enjoy the simple moments that he had missed during his years of intense work. It wasn't all easy. Elon had a tendency to get lost in his thoughts, often drifting back into the future, thinking about SpaceX, Tesla, and all the things yet to be done. But he was learning, slowly, that balance was the key. Work, family, health. It was all part of the equation. One evening, while sitting with his children at dinner, one of his sons asked, "Dad, do you think we'll really go to Mars?" Elon paused, looking at his son's eager face. The question wasn't just about the mission to Mars, it was about the future, about the unknown. And for the first time in a long time, Elon felt a deep sense of peace. "I think we will," he said, his voice steady. "But it won't be just me. It will be all of us. Every single person who believes in something bigger than themselves. That's what makes it possible." And as Elon looked around the table, surrounded by his children, he realized that the future, no matter how uncertain, was worth the fight. He might not have all the answers, but he had the will to keep moving forward, to keep pushing, to keep building. And perhaps, in the end, that's what mattered most. As Elon Musk stood before the mirror in the quiet of his private office, he found himself reflecting on his journey, not just from a young, audacious entrepreneur to the leader of some of the most innovative companies in the world, but from a man who had once felt invincible to one who had learned the true meaning of vulnerability. The reflection before him had changed. The man in the mirror wasn't just Elon Musk the visionary, the billionaire entrepreneur who had changed industries. He was someone who had fought against odds, faced personal demons, and found peace in the most unexpected of places, within himself. The final chapter of his story wasn't about what more he could achieve. It was about what he could leave behind. Throughout his career, Elon had been driven by a single-minded goal, to reshape the world, to alter the course of humanity's future. From the early days of Tesla to the audacious idea of colonizing Mars, every move he made had been guided by the belief that the status quo was never good enough, that we were meant to push further, dream bigger, and break barriers. But through the uncertainty of his illness, the painful process of re-evaluating his priorities, and the transformation of his leadership, Elon began to recognize that success wasn't just about reaching the stars, it was about lifting others up to reach them too. The next phase of Elon's life would be a departure from the ceaseless hustle of innovation for innovation's sake. It would be about legacy. What he could impart to the world after the boards of Tesla and SpaceX had become places of calm, where leaders like Gwynne Shotwell, Drew Baglino, and Zach Kirkhorn could carry on the work they had started together. But even more than that, it would be about the lessons learned through hardship, leadership, and above all, the recognition that a world that can change begins with the people willing to change with it. In the quiet of his office, Elon pondered the changes he'd made in his life. Gone were the days when he felt compelled to be at the forefront of every decision. He knew now that leadership was not about having all the answers, but about empowering those around him to rise to challenges with the same level of ambition and resilience. The companies he had created were no longer one-man shows, they were ecosystems where growth, innovation, and change came from all directions. Tesla, under Zach Kirkhorn's stewardship, had not only continued its momentum but had ramped up efforts to expand the availability of electric vehicles globally. The gigafactories had become hubs of sustainable energy solutions, with the mission to make clean energy ubiquitous across the globe. And as new models of electric cars rolled out, they weren't just symbols of progress, they were proof of what could be achieved when a team shared a vision and believed in it wholeheartedly. SpaceX, meanwhile, had entered a new era under Gwynne Shotwell's leadership. With multiple successful launches of Starship prototypes, plans for a Mars mission were more than just a dream, they were becoming a reality. Elon had always been captivated by space, but now, he understood something deeper: space exploration was about humanity, not just technology. It was about bringing together the best minds from all corners of the world to create a future that was not bound by Earth's limitations. At the core of it all was the principle that had guided Elon's life: there was no problem too big, no goal too unattainable. And this belief was embedded in the culture of the companies he had built. Every employee at Tesla and SpaceX knew that the impossible was simply the first step towards something greater. But what of the world beyond his companies? Elon had always been a divisive figure: his personality, his methods, his refusal to bow to the pressures of traditional corporate life had drawn as much criticism as admiration. He had faced public backlash, been labeled as stubborn, even reckless. There were those who questioned whether his ambition was worth the cost, especially when his personal health and well-being had been compromised. Yet, the challenges he faced were exactly what allowed him to see the world differently. What had once seemed like defeat had turned into an opportunity for profound personal growth. Through his illness, he learned that vulnerability wasn't a weakness, it was a strength. He had learned to lean on others, to trust, and to allow space for those around him to step into leadership roles. Elon had always viewed himself as a disruptor, a force that would change the world by force of will. But now, he saw that the world could change not just by pushing it harder, but by pulling others with him. This realization inspired his next major decision: to invest more in philanthropic causes, particularly those that could have a long-term impact on sustainability, education, and space exploration. He quietly began funneling resources into initiatives that would lay the groundwork for future generations: efforts to make clean water and energy accessible in developing regions, to create sustainable urban environments, and to educate the next generation of innovators in science and technology. These were not the flashy, headline-grabbing projects he had once been known for, but they were the ones that had the potential to change the world in ways that no rocket could reach. And while Elon continued to be involved in his companies, he now made more room for his personal life. He became more present for his children, taking time to share his passions and hopes for the future with them. His relationships with family and friends, once a casualty of his single-minded focus, had now become a cornerstone of his life. His children, in particular, seemed to understand his evolution. They had grown alongside him, learning that success wasn't about being the loudest or the fastest. It was about making meaningful contributions to the world and staying true to your values. Looking toward the future, Elon knew there was still work to be done. He had no intention of stepping away completely. There were still ideas in his mind, still plans he had yet to see through. But he no longer saw the work as an unrelenting grind, he saw it as an opportunity to leave a legacy that would endure far beyond his time. He had lived through moments of triumph and failure, faced the depths of uncertainty, and emerged with a clearer understanding of what truly mattered. The question wasn't just what he had built, it was what he would leave behind. And as he took a deep breath, looking out over the horizon, Elon Musk realized that the legacy he wanted to create wasn't just about the technology, the cars, or the rockets. It was about the impact on humanity, the understanding that the future was not something to be feared, but something to be shaped, by everyone. The greatest lesson he could leave behind wasn't in a business report or a scientific breakthrough. It was in the hearts and minds of those who dared to dream as he had, who believed that nothing was impossible, and who carried the mantle of change forward. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?